Yo, welcome back. Dr. Jason here, Dental Lighthouse Podcast. Wanted to unpack a question I got from a coaching client regarding routers and how to use routers throughout the office, and more importantly, what's on the back of the router. What is the secret sauce on the back of the router? So let me read this email for you. Hey Jason, hope all is well. I know that you often lecture and coach us on how to use routers. I tried to implement it last week and it went over like a lead balloon. My team feels it's excessive work. I struggle to explain the why to them. Can you give me some thoughts as to how I can go back to my team and let them know that routers will actually make us better, not create more work? Thank you, Jamie. Super good question, right? So let's unpack this. So from a communication perspective, I think the routers are an amazing tool. Routers and handoffs. And we will maybe create another episode about handoffs. But the router, specifically the back of the router, has a lot of really, really important information that can prevent a lot of mistakes from occurring in the office. I'd be more than happy to share with you guys my version of the back of our router. Feel free to email me or shoot me a text. You can find my information on our website, dentallighthouse.com. But I want to walk you through what's on the back of our router, and I'll try to touch upon why each one of these is on the back of the router. So at the top of the router, the first thing you'll see is services that should be walked out. Well, you're probably saying to yourself, why do I need to write down what services are being walked out? Can't I just do that in Open Dental or whatever software you're using? The answer to your question is yes, you could do that in Open Dental. But what we had found happens a majority of the time is a couple things. So for example, things get scheduled in your dental software. Let's say 14 MOD, 13 buildup and crown, right? Patient ends up coming into the treatment room, some type of dentistry gets performed, and then you automatically just post a walkout what was scheduled. But what if an MOD wasn't done on 14? What if an MO was done on 14? Or what if the buildup and crown wasn't done, instead just the crown, not the buildup? And you kind of blanked on that. So you just, as you do, you go through your automation, or at the end of the day, you're doing chart notes, and you just post a walkout what was scheduled. Well, that's a mistake, and it can lead to a chain reaction of a number of issues, because if you walked out 14 MOD, but say only 14 MO was done, and then an insurance claim gets generated for 14 MOD. As you know, if you guys have been exposed to these types of situations, it just leads to a lot of additional work when it really never had to happen in the first place. So what we do is, on the top part of the router, on services to be walked out, we have either the doctor or the assistant or the hygienist, who's ever managing the appointment, write down specifically what they did. Now, 75-80% of the time, it's exactly what was scheduled, but oftentimes it's not. Another great example is, what if there's 4 or 5 fillings that are scheduled to be done? That's what's in your dental software, but you didn't get through them all. Put down specifically on the back of the router exactly what you did. It's a great system for checks and balances on specifically what you did versus what was actually scheduled. So that's the first section of the router. Right next to that, we have a box that says any adjustments, okay? Now, by any adjustments, we're talking about conversations that the doctor typically has with the patient, and somehow that information never gets to the front desk. So we've all been in those situations where a patient was like, "Doc, this dentistry is killing me. Can you give me a bigger discount than 5% prepay?" I know I've been there, and just to make the patient shut up and just to make the conversation go away, I say, "Yeah, absolutely, I'll give you 10% off what we're doing today," right? So I said that, the patient heard that, but how does that information get up to the front desk? And if the information does get to the front desk, it's usually from the patient's perspective, right? So the patient goes to the front desk, The front desk person quotes them a copay, and then the patient says, oh, no, doc told me I got 10% off, not 5% off. So now what happens? The front desk person has to walk all the way back to the doctor's office and say, cranky old Mr. Jones is at the front desk and he said that you gave him 10% off instead of 5% off. Oh yeah, I did. Sorry, I didn't communicate that to you. That's a lot of additional work that really didn't have to occur. Now, could that be done through the dental software in the moment? Absolutely. But do you trust the team member to do that the right way in the treatment room? More often than not, you don't. So next to the services to be walked out on the back of our router is a nice little section that says any adjustments that need to be done. So that 5% to 10% is one example. Here's another great example, right? So you did a class 4 filling on Johnny, the 15-year-old punk, 6 months ago, and you warned the mom and you warned Johnny that if he gets in another scuffle with another kid, or if he's not wearing his mouth guard when he's playing basketball, the chances of it breaking are going to exist. So sure enough, nobody listens to you, and he's, gnawing on something that he shouldn't be gnawing on, a pen or something, and it breaks. So they come in 6 months later, and the mom's pissed at you because it shouldn't have broke, totally forgets all the warnings that you gave her. So now you have to fix this thing. Are you going to charge them a full fee? You're going to charge them half fee? What are you going to charge them, right? So insurance has already been walked out for this because you did it 6 months ago. So decide what's fair, right? Like if you want to draw a line in the sand and bill it fully, boom, bill it fully. What I typically do in situations like that, because it doesn't take me very long to do, I say, look, this is just another warning. Like this thing is going to break if he doesn't take care of it. I'll charge you half today to fix it, but I'm going to charge you full fee next time. So mom's happy, and then you diffuse the situation. But how do you communicate to the front desk that you're taking 50% off the bill on this particular appointment? You write right in the box where it says any adjustments that you're 50% off copay or 50% off out of pocket, whatever it is. The next box on the back of the router that we have filled out is who is the team player that's assisting the doctor. If you're in a big group, our flagship office has 5 doctors, 10 or 12 assistants, 8 hygienists. So you can't always figure out who's exactly helping who. The other situation that comes up, especially on the doctor side, is multiple assistants can be in the room throughout the appointment trying to help out. So if there's a question about something, then we need to know who was supporting the doctor for that particular appointment. So there's a box on the back of the router that says, who was the assistant or who was the hygienist that was managing the case? Who was the doctor that's managing the case? You can write that in. Sometimes I get a little bit of pushback on this one, and they say something like, well, can't you just tell whoever was logged into the dental software who ultimately walked out the appointment? No, you can't, because Sally, one of the assistants, may have logged in that particular room, but what if Sally was on a break and Julie jumped in to help the doctor for that particular appointment? That's why I think having the backup here of information on the back of the router is so important. So that's the top of the router. And again, if you want a copy of this, feel free to text or email me. You can go to dentallighthouse.com, and my information's right on the main page. So that's the top, right? So what do we put in the middle section of the router? In the middle section of the router is an opportunity to put some treatment planning stuff, right? So we like to treatment plan in phases and in quadrants. So it gives us an opportunity to lay all of that out on the router. It's a really nice way to do it if you don't have time to put all of that into the dental software. Another thing that we put in that treatment planning section of the router is if we're giving choices. I'm not a huge proponent of entering in multiple choices into the software. Some docs, at least early on, they'll give a patient 3, 4, 5 choices on something. It just leads to chaos, and that's another episode that we can do on case presentation and keeping it simple, but everybody kind of learns at their own pace. So if they're going to want to give, say, 2 or 3 choices to someone regarding a treatment plan, then they put it on the router, and then ultimately the TC will present the different options of whatever the patient ends up going with. That's the treatment plan that'll ultimately get put into Open Dental. It just also creates more accuracy with whatever data analytics software you're looking at, like typically the Practice by Numbers or the Dental Intel. Your case acceptance will be way down if you're adding 3 or 4 treatment plans into the chart and the patient ultimately chooses one, but you leave those other ones in the chart. So that's typically the middle section. The next section of the back of the router is a section on miscellaneous information that might come out throughout the appointment. So let's say you have a doc that's struggling with doing endo and they ultimately decide to refer the patient. So there's a section for who we're going to ultimately refer to. There's a section that talks about medical clearances. Just as checks and balances, a little bit more information. Then to the right of that particular box, we have a reminder section for hygienists and assistants, asking some basic questions. One of the key ones is if a crown is being treatment planned, we ask the question, is this the initial or replacement prosthetic for this particular tooth, right? And we all know why it's super important to ask if it's initial or replacement, right? A lot of times we'll present a buildup in crown on a current crown that has recurrent decay underneath it. Maybe the crown was done 3-4 years ago at another office and we weren't aware of it. Patient has no idea. So we'll ask the patient, but they really, oh yeah, it was done 20 years ago. They don't know. So if we can circle this as a replacement, then that cues our treatment coordinator to make sure we look for a history with that particular insurance so we can give more accurate copay and insurance estimate information. This has been a game changer for us. Now we just have to make sure that we actually fill it out. So that's one in there. We're actually in the process of considering putting a DMF percentage next to that as well. And for those of you guys that are not using AI software, DMF stands for decayed, missing, or filled. Most insurances will not cover a crown unless the DMF percentage is 50% or more. So I'm not suggesting that you can't treatment plan a tooth to be restored with a crown unless it has a 50% DMF or higher. But what I am suggesting is if the treatment plan comes to the front desk and the DMF is less than 50%, then we have to have some other conversations. Has additional records been collected, like intraoral photographs or a preoperative scan? Does the patient realize that the chances of this restoration being fully covered or being covered by insurance, it's lower than normal, right? So these are conversations that we want to empower our treatment coordinators to have with patients, as opposed to what's traditionally happening is a DMF is less than 50%, there was no intraoral picture taken, there was no preoperative scan taken, the insurance denies the claim, we appeal it, they deny the appeal, and now the patient has to pay an additional $400, $500, $600 out of pocket. Who is the patient mad at? We want them to be mad at the insurance company because they denied a service that, in our opinion, was really needed. So, in theory, we could go say to the patient, go get mad at the insurance company. They're not going to go get mad at the insurance company. They're going to get mad at you and the treatment coordinator specifically, because the treatment coordinator said your insurance will most likely cover ... Now, again, we have all this documentation that this is just an estimate of benefits and all this stuff. Patients don't remember that, right? So we try to do everything that we can to protect ourselves, let's say. So if we put the DMF percentage on the router and they go to the front desk, the TC sees that, they see a DMF of 65%, they can say with confidence that this restoration is most likely going to get covered by insurance. If the DMF percentage is less than 50%, then it cues the TC to make sure that we have the right documentation, the right diagnosis, is it cracked tooth syndrome, stuff like that. And if it's not any of those things, then it leads to a really good conversation with the patient that, Dr. So-and-so is treatment planning this tooth that needs a crown. We edify the doctor. The doctor really knows what he's doing, so we would strongly recommend you do this. But I just want you to realize that because of the parameters that your insurance company is putting on treatment, the chances of this being approved are not likely. Just have that conversation ahead of time. So then the next section of the router, this is the section that I think is probably the most important. We call it the NDTR, and I got that acronym from the one and only Kira Dent. Kira, if you're listening, I love you. So NDTR, so we have four boxes, and in each one we put an N, a D, a T, and an R. So N stands for next appointment. What is the next appointment for Mrs. Jones? Is it 14 MO? Is it 13 buildup and crown? The doctor came into the hygiene exam and it was a whirlwind and everybody was all over the place, and the doctor talked about a lot of different things, and different things needed in different quadrants. We have to find out from the doctor, okay, doc, we talked about a lot of stuff here. What is the next appointment? And clear as day, you find out what the next appointment is and you put it in the N box on the back of the router. The next box is the D box, D as in dog. That stands for due date. And by that we mean, when does this next appointment need to be scheduled? This is so important. You should be having this conversation at morning meeting, right? So Mrs. Jones just gets diagnosed out of hygiene with the need for buildup and crown on 14. Now, if the doc is trying to create a huge sense of urgency, the hygienist is trying to create a huge sense of urgency, but Mrs. Jones gets to the front desk and the TC says, doc's next available appointment is in 6 weeks, that's an issue, right? So at morning meeting, we have to coordinate when's the doctor's next available first chair appointment, and then we have to be cognizant of that. So when we're filling this out, we're filling it out in a way that leads to fluid communication from the back to the front. So if at morning meeting it was discovered that the next available appointment is in 3 weeks, then I would say, Mrs. Jones, the next appointment, what we put in the N box, is 14 buildup and crown. I need you to get that taken care of sometime within the next 3 to 4 weeks, so the patient has a little bit of bandwidth and they have a little bit of autonomy when they're choosing the appointment. If you say, Mrs. Jones, I need you to do this ASAP, and they get to the front and you don't have any ASAP, it just leads to a lot of problems. If you do have an appointment the next day, and that was discovered at morning meeting, then my timeline changes. Then in the due date box, I say ASAP. I say to Mrs. Jones, this tooth's got a significant crack in it. I'm worried that if you bite into something just the right way, this thing's gonna split and it's gonna be a definite root canal if we can save it at all. I need you to get this taken care of ASAP. Put ASAP right on the back of the router. The hygienist walks it up to the front, and again, we'll do a whole separate episode on handoffs, but right up to the front, and on the back of the router, it says 14 buildup and crown on the next box, and on the due date box, it says ASAP. The next box after that, the T box, remember it's NDTR. The T box is how much time does the doc need for this appointment? Sometimes it's 60 minutes, sometimes it's 90 minutes, sometimes it's 120 minutes. Don't make the treatment coordinator guess. Just put in the box how much time the doctor needs. And, I get that, 90% of the time, the doc's either scheduling an hour and a half for a crown or an hour for a crown or anything like that. But we all know that there's subtle differences, right? So what if it's tooth number 4 and it's endo treated? Do you need an hour and a half? Let's say the doc typically schedules an hour and a half for all of his crowns, but this one's endo treated. The endodontist already did the bonded buildup, and now you need to do the build and crown. That's a half-hour appointment. So put 30 minutes. Don't put 90 minutes. Or what if a patient traditionally doesn't want any anesthetic? That's a shorter appointment. Or what if it's, Mr. Smith, who's a little heavy, a little overweight, can't lean back all the way. You see him on the schedule and you start to cringe, you start to get sick to your stomach, and you're gonna need twice as much time to deal with that patient, even though it's a easy clinical case, right? So you're gonna give yourself more time. So build up and crown on that patient is 2 hours, right? So this is such a great way to customize what you're doing so you can be more efficient in your schedule. Now, we can create a whole nother episode talking about scheduling templates and stuff like that. In fact, I did a great I think it's great, I'm a little biased, but I did a presentation on different types of templates for doctor scheduling. Maybe I'll share that here. But in our world, we talk about 2 chairs, first chair, second chair. So on our NDTR form, on the T form, the time, we're gonna say 60 minutes first chair, 90 minutes second chair, 30 minutes first chair, whatever. So you get up to the front desk and there's no questions. Susie Sunshine, who's your treatment coordinator, is not running all around the office like, doc, how much time do you need for this? What chair am I supposed to put this person in? And if that's not happening in your office, kudos to you, but I can assure you it's happening in a lot of offices, okay? So again, NDTR. N is next appointment, D is due date for that next appointment, T is how much time and what chair do you need, and R stands for recall. Make sure they have a hygiene appointment. The hygienist ideally should schedule a recall in the back, but if they don't have the time or if they forgot, when the router gets brought up to the front, Susie Sunshine, your greeting coordinator, will see that the box is not filled out, confirm it with looking at the dental software. Oh, Mrs. Jones, we weren't able to schedule your next cleaning appointment in the back. I can do that for you right now. My computer just shut off, so I need to turn it back on so I can look at the rest of the router. So that's NDTR. Couple more things that we put on this router. This is the bottom part of the router. This is the, actually I'm gonna do the most important thing last. We have a box on prescriptions needed. So if someone needs to pre-med, then we fill it out in the router. If someone has an active infection and the doc recommended an antibiotic, we put it in that box on the back of the router. And then the most important box is the doctor signature box. Now, I know I'm probably gonna get some pushback for this, but doctors are the leaders of the office. Even if they're not owners, even if they're associates and they want absolutely no leadership responsibility. I have some great doctors, great people, great producers who really want to have nothing to do with leadership. And luckily our organization is set up in a way where they don't have to do that, right? But at the end of the day, the information that I just went through, all the information on the back of the router, it's either accurate or it's not, okay? Depending on who fills it out, how the communication was in the treatment room. As soon as the doctor signs the bottom of the router, it's now officially accurate based on the doctor's validation, based on the doctor's review of the router. So we will not take a router at the front desk unless it's signed off by the doctor. And by the doctor signing it off, he is telling everyone that reviews this router that this information is accurate. So how long does it take to just review all the information that I went over? Less than 30 seconds. Okay, what was walked out? Do I want to give an adjustment? Is there any treatment plan here that I need to make sure is accurate? What's the next appointment? How long do I need for that next appointment? When should I schedule that next appointment? Again, 20 to 30 seconds, sign off on the router, and the doctor leaves and goes to the next hygiene room or back to their operatory chair. Having the doctor sign off and validate all of the information on the router is extremely important. So again, I appreciate you guys hearing me out on this. If you have a small office, small team, tons of accountability built into the team, if your employees have been with you for 20 years, do you need to have something like this set up? Probably not, right? You guys can read each other's thoughts. You already know what the treatment plan is going to be. You already know when your next opening is. You already know how much time doc is going to need. You probably don't need something like this. But if you have, like for example, in our flagship office, we have 40 to 50 employees. If a majority of them are under 25, you need this system of checks and balances, because when you don't, you got people running around the office asking questions. You got claims getting submitted for care that wasn't done, or procedures that were not 100% accurate. You know, like the MOD being walked out when only an MO was done. And you guys know that when you have team members running around the office asking questions, when you have services walked out that weren't actually done, it just leads to such a level of chaos and additional work for everyone. It's just not worth it. So consider using the back of a router. Like I said, check out my contact information on dentalonhouse.com, and I can send it to you. And then reach out if you have any questions in terms of implementing it. So to go back to Jamie's question, the doctor that emailed me about this, everything that I just shared here should help you communicate the why. This is why we encourage offices to use the back of the router to communicate from the back to the front. Love you guys. Reach out if you need anything.